No one noticed the bull was crying, until a quiet teen sat beside it in silence. The rain tapped steadily against the cracked wooden fence as Noah Bell stood alone, his hoodie soaked and dripping, the mud sucking at his worn sneakers. Wind hissed through the high grass, swaying the rusted Marrow Creek Ranch sign like a dying pendulum. The bus had already pulled away, leaving him in the gray stillness of the evening. Thunder rolled far off in the hills. Behind him, the other boys from Grafton High had scattered across the property, half-heartedly chasing after the day's assigned chores. Noah didn't move with them. He stood still, eyes locked on the far corner of the paddock, where the bull stood. The animal was massive, nearly black, with streaks of dried mud along his flanks and a single horn curving awkwardly toward the ground. The other was shattered, jagged and worn down. The bull didn't move. He just stood beneath the overcast sky, his head lowered, shoulders slack, as if the weight of the world pressed down on his spine. His name, Noah had learned, was Orso. "No one goes near that pen," barked a voice behind him. Mr. Clevin, the ranch supervisor, stomped past, his raincoat flapping like wings. "You hear me, Bell?" Noah didn't respond. Clevin stopped beside him, following his gaze to the bull. "He's mean. Snapped a vet's rib last year. Kicked a man so hard he cracked through the fence like it was balsa wood. I don't care what he looks like. He's not your friend." Noah's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Clevin grunted and walked on, shouting orders at two boys fumbling with hay bales by the barn. "And keep your hands out of your pockets when you work, Brooks. This ain't a holiday." Noah's fingers tightened around the damp strap of his backpack. He turned from the fence and headed toward the feed shed. But all the way there, he felt the bull's eyes watching him. Not with anger, not with fear, just stillness, like something thinking too deeply to look away. It wasn't until the third day that Noah noticed something impossible. The rain hadn't let up all week. He arrived that afternoon with his hood pulled tight, keeping to himself as always. His task was to scrub the chicken troughs near the back fence. No one checked on him. Nobody cared if he did it right. When he finished, hands red from cold water, he found himself drifting again toward the far paddock. Orso hadn't moved from his corner. The mud around him had deepened, pooling by his hooves. His thick neck stayed bowed. His ribs expanded and sank with slow, heavy breaths. Noah leaned on the fence and studied him. That's when he saw it, clear as a cut. A tear. It slid from the bull's left eye, clean and unmistakable, cutting a thin trail down his dusty cheek. Another followed it. The rain had started to ease up, making the tear all the more visible. It wasn't runoff. It was real. Noah blinked and looked again. The bull's gaze met his. For one terrible moment, Noah felt like he was the one being watched, as if the creature could see directly into his thoughts. He took a step back, heart thudding. Was this normal? Did animals cry? "Noah!" someone shouted. It was Carter, one of the older volunteers. "Stop loitering! Clevin's on the warpath again!" Noah turned and walked away, but his mind stayed in that corner. That night at home, he couldn't sleep. He searched everything he could on his old laptop. Can bulls cry? Why do cows tear up? Most articles said no, not the way humans do. Maybe eye irritation, dust, infection, but not sadness. And yet, he knew what he saw. The next day, instead of going straight to the tool shed, he brought a book with him. It was an old science reader from the school library, facts about weather patterns and animals and river erosion. He finished his chores quickly, then sat cross-legged by Orso's fence and began to read aloud. His voice was soft, uncertain, cracking from disuse. He didn't expect a reaction, but he read anyway. The largest cloud formations can span hundreds of kilometers, forming when moist air rises and cools. The bull didn't move, but he listened. That was the strange part. He actually listened. His ears twitched toward the voice. He didn't shift or turn away. He just breathed, slow, steady, like someone remembering a distant song. And so it continued. Each afternoon, Noah came with a new book, sometimes a newspaper article, sometimes even his own notebook filled with copied facts. He never touched the bull, never climbed the fence. He just read and sat and waited. It became a quiet ritual. The others ignored him, assuming he was just odd. Clevin stopped noticing him altogether, but Noah noticed something else. Orso began to change. The pacing stopped. The pawing at the ground lessened. One afternoon, Noah sat in silence, not reading, just watching, and Orso laid down near the fence for the first time. The giant beast rested his heavy head near the wood planks, inches from Noah's boots. He didn't close his eyes. He simply stayed there, breathing. Noah exhaled slowly, heart pounding. He didn't move. He didn't dare. Later that week, while filling feed bins by the barn, Noah heard Clevin talking on the phone. The man didn't know he was there. "Yeah, Clevin said, rubbing the back of his neck. The bull's no good anymore. No fight left in him. Just stands around all day. Vet said his leg's stiff again, too. Useless animal. We'll send him out next week. Euthanize or salvage, whatever gets us more money. Noah froze, feed scoop in midair. Salvage? He knew what that meant. If they couldn't kill Orso on paper, they'd cut him up for parts. Sold off. Rendered. Gone. The scoop clattered to the ground. Clevin turned toward the noise, but Noah was already walking away, jaw clenched, fists tight. That night, he searched again. He dug through livestock protection laws, state-level agriculture rights, and any loophole he could find. That's when he discovered something buried in a record book. Orso had been a championship bull in the North Carnera Fighting League 7 years ago. He had a nameplate, papers, even a registry number. Championship animals were protected by legacy status, especially if injured, especially if improperly transferred. The realization hit him like a flood. If he could prove it, if he could show someone, maybe he could stop the kill order. Noah printed what he could from the library computer. Old match records, transfer documents, state law sections. He slipped it all into a folder and kept it hidden in his bag. There was no time to lose. He planned to get everything together by Sunday, email the registry office, maybe call someone official. But fate moved first. On Friday morning, the sky was unusually clear. No fog, no rain. The ranch had a strange stillness to it. When the boys stepped off the bus, they noticed it immediately. The fence was open, wide open, and Orso was gone. The latch hung twisted, not cut. The gate sagged inward like something massive had forced its way through. Clevin's whistle rang sharp across the yard. "Everyone back inside!" he shouted, storming toward the empty pen. "Where is he? Where's the bull?" One of the boys muttered, "Did someone let him out?" Clevin's eyes landed on Noah. "You!" he growled, walking toward him. "You've been sitting by that fence all week. You know something?" Noah's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Behind him, the gate creaked in the wind, and in the distance, far beyond the fence line, muddy hoofprints led toward the trees. But just as he started forming a plan, the ranch's main gate was left unlocked one morning, and Orso was gone. Bootprints sank deep into the wet mud as voices rose across Marrow Creek Ranch. The air buzzed with tension, the morning fog still clinging to the fence posts and the grass heavy with dew. Clevin stood at the edge of Orso's pen, fists balled tight at his hips, jaw grinding as he stared at the empty enclosure. The gate was hanging crooked, one hinge twisted out of shape. Mud and splintered wood surrounded the area, and a trail of hoofprints led north, straight toward the tree line. "What did I tell you?" Clevin snapped, his voice cutting through the fog like a whip. "Those blasted activists, been sniffing around for weeks. I knew they'd try something." He turned to the small cluster of ranch hands and boys standing a few feet behind him. Most of them stayed quiet, shifting their weight, uncertain. The only one who didn't look confused was Noah. Noah stood a few paces back, staring at the broken gate. His eyes narrowed, not in fear, but in disbelief. He had studied the lock yesterday. It hadn't been weak, and the latch wasn't cut. It was bent from the inside out, the way metal bends under pressure, not tools. His chest tightened as he followed the prints with his eyes, watching them vanish into the thick woods. Clevin's voice rose again. "I want that bull found. We'll have to call in the sheriff. Maybe even get tranquilizer teams out here. He's dangerous and can't be loose near town." The words stirred something sharp in Noah's stomach. Dangerous. The same word they'd used over and over without ever really looking. Orso hadn't escaped because of sabotage. He hadn't been let out. He'd left. That afternoon, while the others scrubbed troughs and repaired fencing, Noah quietly slipped away, ducking behind the old shed with his folder of documents tucked inside his coat. His backpack bounced against his spine as he made his way past the perimeter and toward the woods. He knew he risked more than detention. If Clevin caught him sneaking off again, he could be banned from the ranch altogether. But he had to know where Orso had gone. The hoofprints were easier to follow than he expected, cutting through underbrush and shallow streams, over fallen logs and slippery rocks. The trees grew thicker the deeper he went, blotting out the sun in places. Branches scratched at his arms. Every few steps he paused to listen, wind rustling leaves, the occasional bird cry, but nothing else. Then the woods began to change. The light grew colder, the air denser. The trail led him to a clearing, broad, circular, strangely quiet. No birds sang here, no wind moved the high grass. And there, in the center, stood Orso. The bull was completely still. His great shoulders rose and fell with steady breaths. Around him, the trees formed a perfect ring, each trunk marked with deep carvings, symbols that looked ancient, their lines sharp even through the moss. A large, flat stone rested near the middle of the clearing, and carved into its surface was a familiar image, a bird with wings folded and a branch in its beak. Noah's breath caught in his throat. It was the same symbol that hung from Orso's old brass medallion. Orso didn't move as Noah stepped into the clearing. He turned his head slowly, his eyes calm. Not wild, not afraid, just aware, like he'd been waiting. Noah lowered himself into the grass, feeling the dampness soak through his jeans. His voice didn't work. His thoughts barely held shape. But somewhere deep in his chest, he understood. This wasn't escape. This was memory. He didn't know how long he sat there, just watching Orso stand among the carved trees. When he finally returned home, it was nearly dark. He barely spoke to his uncle, barely ate dinner. Instead, he pulled out everything he could find: old newspaper clippings, library books, digital archives. He searched terms like Marrow Creek land history, local cattle guilds, ceremonial sites, and animal burial grounds. It took hours, but eventually a name surfaced: the Carnivalian Order, an ancient group, long defunct, that once bred bulls not just for strength, but for spirit. They believed some animals had memory that extended beyond instinct, memory that echoed through generations. According to the only article he found in an archived Grafton Times edition, the order had been based in the hills surrounding what was now Marrow Creek Ranch. The land had once been sacred. The circle in the forest, Old Harrow's clearing, was described as the place where animals returned to sleep. It was dismissed as legend. The article called it cattle folklore. But Noah wasn't laughing, because Orso had returned. The next few days brought something stranger. The ranch animals began to act wrong. Dogs refused to go near the back fence. One snapped and whimpered when forced to. The horses grew skittish, kicking stalls and bucking during training. One goat refused to eat, pacing nonstop. Even the birds seemed to avoid flying over the woods. Noah noticed. So did Clevin. But where Noah saw patterns, Clevin saw enemies. He snapped at the volunteers, shouted at staff, and one morning ripped a clipboard in half when someone mentioned the missing bull during a staff meeting. Then the sheriff showed up. 2 deputies climbed out of a truck and walked straight to the barn office. Clevin intercepted them quickly, dragging them into the tack room and closing the door. Noah watched from the stable as one of the boys leaned toward him. "Someone told them you were trespassing," the boy said under his breath. Noah's pulse kicked up. He dropped the pitchfork and hurried to the side gate, trying to slip away, but a heavy hand landed on his shoulder. "Bell," a deputy said. "We need a word." They brought him inside and sat him at the break room table. The light buzzed overhead. One of the officers was young, frowning like he didn't want to be here. The other was older, sharper-eyed. "We heard you were wandering onto restricted land," the older one said. "Harrow's Woods. Know anything about that?" Noah glanced at the window. "I was following something." The deputy raised an eyebrow. "The bull?" Before he could answer, the door swung open. Clevin marched in, holding a handful of printed pages. "He's been stealing ranch files," he barked, throwing the papers on the table. "Drawing symbols, making up stories. Said the bull's some kind of spirit. He's disturbed. Needs to be kept off the property." "That's not true," Noah said, standing up, but his voice came out too soft. The deputies looked at each other. The younger one shrugged. "This sounds more like a school problem than a legal one." Clevin leaned down to Noah's ear. "You stay away from here, you hear me? You're done." The next day, Noah found his locker at school emptied. His folder was gone. The counselor said he'd been suspended from the volunteer program and wouldn't be allowed near Marrow Creek again. His voice, once more, meant nothing. He walked home in silence. But by the time he reached the edge of Grafton Hollow, a white news van was parked near the main road. 2 reporters and a cameraman stood outside the gate, filming B-roll. Clevin stood with them, arms crossed, looking grim. "They sabotaged the gate," he told the camera. "Released a dangerous animal. It's lucky no one's been hurt yet. We'll have to put him down before he hurts someone." Noah's hands shook. Every word was wrong. Orso wasn't dangerous. But now the world had swallowed the lie, and soon men would follow the trail with guns and syringes, chasing a creature that just wanted to remember where he came from. That night, Noah didn't sleep. He packed a bag, filled it with his notes, and mapped out the trail again. But someone beat him to it. The next morning, as the town still stirred itself awake, a man arrived in a charcoal gray coat. He didn't knock at the sheriff's office or call ahead to the ranch. He simply walked through the mud, gloves spotless, clipboard under one arm. His face was pale and unreadable. His voice clipped and calm. "Dr. Vane," he said to the gate hand, "Department of Agricultural Forensics." The man didn't ask questions. He just smiled once and said, "I'm here for the bull." The storm came hard that night, ripping through the forest like something alive. Lightning clawed across the sky in sharp blue streaks. Trees bent under the weight of the wind, Branches snapped and flew like spears, and rain flooded the ground until the soil itself seemed to tremble. The last transmission from the search team crackled over the radio at 11:42 p.m. After that, silence. By sunrise, only one vehicle had not returned, Dr. Vane's. The truck was discovered by a ranger near Old Harrow's clearing, abandoned with its engine still warm. No tracks, no blood, just the faint whiff of ozone and something else, earthy, heavy, like wet fur. Inside, on the dashboard, a single voice recorder lay beside Vane's satchel. Noah stood beside the ranger as they played it. Static bled through, followed by the unmistakable strain in Vane's voice. "The bull is more than it appears." That was all. Noah barely slept that night. His thoughts churned like the flooded creeks outside his window. Dr. Vane was gone. The ranch owner, Clevin, had said nothing. In fact, he had locked down the property, silencing workers with cash and threats. Noah could feel the noose tightening. Whatever Orso was, whatever truth Vane had glimpsed, it was slipping away. He needed help. Not from scientists or journalists or local authorities. They had their own reasons to stay blind. He turned instead to Mr. Henley, a retired history teacher known for his strange collection of local legends and maps older than the town itself. Noah biked through the storm's leftovers, mud splattering his jeans, until the old mill house came into view, nestled in fog at the edge of Broken Ridge Creek. Henley was exactly as Noah remembered him from middle school, tall, wiry, with a white beard that looked like it belonged in a cave. His house smelled of cedar, ink, and something medicinal. Books were stacked against every wall, and a faded mural of animals circled the ceiling. Henley listened in silence as Noah explained everything. Orso's tears, the symbols, Vane's disappearance. When Noah finished, the old man leaned back, fingers steepled under his chin. "You're not the first to see strange things in Harrow," Henley said, his voice soft but certain. "But you might be the first who wasn't afraid." He turned and pulled a weathered leather folder from his shelf. Inside were charcoal sketches, some dated over 100 years ago. One caught Noah's eye immediately, a massive bull standing beside a stone circle, the same one in the clearing. Around its neck hung a medallion identical to the one Noah had seen mounted on the trophy wall in Clevin's office. "The Carnivalian Order," Henley explained, tracing the bull's outline with one finger. "An ancient belief system brought here by settlers. They believed certain animals weren't just beasts. They were witnesses, carriers of memory. If an animal cried, it remembered. Not just pain, but people, bonds, betrayals." Noah felt a chill crawl across his skin. "You mean Orso was taken? From someone?" Henley nodded. "And he hasn't forgotten." That same evening, Clevin made his move. Frustrated by the stalled recovery and desperate to reassert control, he gathered a group of private hunters. Paid in cash, outfitted with night vision goggles and high-caliber rifles, they entered the forest at dusk. They didn't care about the stories. They wanted the bull down, dead or alive. But the forest had changed. The next morning, only 3 men came back. One was limping with a fractured leg. Another spoke in broken sentences, eyes wide with terror. The third refused to speak at all. Their equipment, cameras, scopes, radios, was found scattered deep in the woods. The footage told the rest. In one video, the men marched toward the clearing, laughing. Then, lights flicker. Trees begin to shake, though no wind can be heard. The audio spikes with screams. The last image. Orso, standing tall in the clearing, eyes glowing faintly under lightning. The footage was never shown publicly, but Noah saw it. Someone slipped it to him, anonymously. It confirmed what he already believed. Orso was no ordinary bull. He wasn't hiding from the world. He was guarding something. Rumors bloomed like mold across the town. Some blamed eco-terrorists. Others said forest spirits. A few even whispered about ghosts. But only Noah knew the truth. Orso remembered. Orso mourned. And maybe, just maybe, Orso protected. Noah returned to the ranch one final time. He slipped through the fencing under moonlight, avoiding the cameras and motion sensors he himself had helped install. He knew where the medallion was, mounted on a wall inside Clevin's private trophy room. It took him 20 minutes and a broken lock to retrieve it. He held it in his hand, cold and heavy, the carvings matching the ones in Henley's folder. At dawn, he entered Old Harrow's clearing. Fog clung low to the earth. The stone circle was untouched, save for the scorch marks left by the storm. Noah stepped into the center, knelt, and placed the medallion on the largest stone. His voice trembled but did not break. "I know who you were," he whispered. "I know what they took from you. I'm sorry. I can't undo it. But I swear to protect this place. You won't be hunted again. Not while I'm alive." The air stilled. The trees, which had whispered in wind, fell silent. Then he heard it. Hooves against soft earth. Orso stepped from the trees. He moved slowly, deliberately, his massive frame lit by morning light filtering through leaves. He stopped in front of Noah, exhaled, and lowered his head. Noah didn't move. His heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his gaze steady. Orso pressed his nose gently against Noah's chest. Then, slowly, the bull walked into the woods and vanished behind the tree line. 3 months later, the front gates of Marrow Creek Ranch groaned one final time before slamming shut. Rusted locks snapped into place, and a long, dust-covered sign swung in the dry wind. Condemned. No entry. A quiet investigation had moved in like fog, slow, unannounced, and nearly invisible to the public. State officials had never made a statement, but those who paid attention noticed the fences coming down, the barns cleared, the pens left empty. Clevin, once loud and booming with orders, vanished during questioning. His truck was found abandoned near the canyon, keys still in the ignition. No trace of him was ever recovered. Rumors spiraled. He'd run to Mexico. He'd changed his name. Or worse, Orso had found him. No one knew for sure. The land was sold in a hush. The new buyer didn't announce himself, didn't hire locals. Fences reappeared, stronger this time, lined with cameras and motion sensors. Bold signs were planted every 100 feet in half a dozen languages. They weren't vague. No trespassing, protected land, violators prosecuted. For miles around, it was clear. Marrow Creek wasn't just private, it was guarded. Some said a sanctuary had been built deep within the woods, a haven for endangered creatures. Others whispered that the place had become haunted. Either way, no one dared cross those lines. Noah was never contacted. Not by the investigators, not by the new owners, not even by Clevin's former staff. He had returned to school quietly, slipping back into classes with the same hushed presence he had always carried. But something had changed. At first he only nodded when spoken to, then answered with small, cautious words. A counselor at the school noted the progress in his file. Student re-engaging with peers, showing signs of trauma healing, rebuilding trust through safe routines. His classmates left him alone for the most part. Some remembered his father had worked at the ranch. Fewer knew about the bull. None knew the full truth. And Noah didn't offer it. He didn't need to. Whatever had happened out there on those fields, behind those barns with that creature, he had carried it back in his eyes. But on certain afternoons, when school let out and the sky was painted with long golden streaks, Noah would walk alone past the edge of town, down the same dirt paths he'd once walked as a child. He followed the riverbank, past the hollow logs and skipping stones, until he reached a crooked willow tree. It stood like a guardian over a soft patch of land by the water, where grass grew taller and the wind moved slower. It was here he liked to sit. On this particular day, the wind was colder than usual, rustling the pages of his worn-out book. He adjusted the collar of his sweater, pulling it tight around his neck, and glanced toward the hill opposite the river. Nothing. Just shadows. But then, something. A crunch. Leaves shifting. Footsteps. Heavy. Rhythmic. Measured. Noah stood, every muscle in his body freezing into alertness. The sounds weren't close, but they weren't far either. Across the river, where the woods broke into a slope, a figure stepped into the clearing. A boy. No older than him. He wore dark clothes, his hands hidden in long sleeves. His face was shadowed by the setting sun. But it wasn't the boy that held Noah's gaze. It was what stood beside him. A bull. Massive. Majestic. Unmistakable. Noah didn't breathe. Couldn't. The bull's eyes locked with his, wide and deep like wells that had held back too much for too long. Its breath curled into the cool air like smoke. Its hooves didn't move, yet its presence rippled across the grass like a wave. Orso. It had to be. Noah's heart pounded in his chest. Was this real? Or some figment of memory pressing through the cracks of grief? But then the boy placed a hand on the bull's neck, gently, like a brother, and the bull dipped its head slowly. This was no illusion, no dream. Someone had found Orso, or perhaps Orso had found someone. The three of them stood like that for several moments. The river ran quiet between them, carrying only the hush of leaves and wind. Noah raised his hand slowly, not a wave, not a signal, just a silent acknowledgement. The boy gave a single nod, then turned. The bull followed. Together they disappeared back into the forest. No one else saw. No one would believe it if he told them. Noah sat back down under the willow. He didn't open his book again. He didn't move for a long time. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. The sun slipped lower behind the trees, painting the river orange. No one noticed the bull was crying, until a quiet teen sat beside it in silence,